Test 1 2 3 3 2 1. What's up, YouTube? And welcome back to another edition of We Don't Miss. I want to thank everybody who tuned into the last video. It was extremely successful, at least for me. It had over 2,000 views within the first 24 hours and lots of comments. So I really appreciate this. I have no sponsors. I'm just doing this for you guys, doing it for myself to try and make sense of this crazy world. So without further ado, this episode is going to, disclaimer, dive into faith in a religious or spiritual context. Now, before you get scared away, if you are not religious, I am not going to preach to you. I am not going to try and convert you. I'm not going to tell you why you should think a certain way, because that is not my prerogative. I hope that you're living your life the best way that you can and finding help and success wherever you can find it. But I want to talk big picture about spirituality and faith in the context of we all are facing difficult times in this ever-changing environment, in this complex world that we live in. And we all hit a point where basic rationale and our skills and our coping mechanisms that we have to deal with what's happening day to day becomes unbearable at some point. And usually most people, when it becomes unbearable, they start asking out of world questions more to the universe of, why is this happening to me? The big question, the greatest question of life, what is my purpose and what's going to happen in the future? And whether you're religious or not, if you're religious, I think, and when I say religion, I'm saying that you believe in some type of specific higher power or entity in the religion that you practice. I think that that is great. And I think that it's easier for individuals that are faith-based in the traditional concept to rely on the teachings in that religion, what's written down in text, being able to attend church or a meeting at whatever type of religious temple you go to. I apologize, I'm not a religious scholar. I don't know the name of all the places where you can practice religions, but you get the point. And that leaves everybody else who is somewhere in the middle. Now you have people that are just straight up atheist, which that's fine too. If you just care or do not care to believe in religion, or you just care or believe in science and that we're all just a makeup of atoms and cells, the evolution theory, essentially, and that when you die, nothing happens. So on one end of the spectrum, you have traditional faith-based individuals. On the other spectrum, you may have people that have zero faith at all and never intend to. And then you have like what I think is most of the population, which is their, I heard somebody say Christ curious. So we'll, instead of using traditional Western religion, such as the Bible and God and Jesus and Christ curious, we'll just say that we're higher power curious. And this is well documented in hospitals where people that are not religious and then they're on their deathbed somehow start praying or calling out to God. I just think that's kind of strange. I don't know if that's a last dish effort to try and cleanse yourself of sin or make peace with this world or this life that you've lived, to bridge over to whatever, if anything, exists on the other side. But I just think that's interesting to note. And also interesting to note, if I can relate to you, maybe you're one of those people, like I mentioned previously, that when you're up against hard times, you start asking questions to something that is not of this world. So I'm going to tell you a quick story. And the reason that I wanted to do this video was for you guys and myself, just to record. So I always have it to look back on, to recap a unique, special experience that I had a couple months ago. It was only about a month ago. And it had to do with transitioning out of the military and searching for a job. So this is not military. This applies to everybody. Say you're switching jobs, say you're looking for a job, whatever the case may be. So here we go. So when I left the military, I have, like Liam Neeson says, a certain set of skills. And those skills don't really translate over to much of anything else. So I'm a pilot in the military, so I know how to fly airplanes. And I was kind of led to believe that if I didn't go fly airplanes, that any other major company that was associated with aerodynamics or Department of Defense would be more than happy to scoop me up, because it's very rare that pilots go do something non-flying, because being a pilot is a very lucrative profession for, for how much you have to work. And you get to travel. So the pay is good, the travel's good, the flexibility of the schedule is amazing, the benefits of being able to get free travel is awesome. And it's a great job. And I just wasn't really drawn to it because I'm a been there, done that kind of guy. Since I'd already flown over a decade, I was like, I want to jump out into the civilian world and see what business is all about and get into a corporation and grind and see if I can climb the corporate ladder. And I started applying for these companies. I'll throw a couple out there, like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Ball, the usual suspects. And to my surprise, I got very little. And when I say very little, I'm talking almost no traction. I got a couple cold emails, a couple cold calls, a couple calls that turned into coffee talks, but no interviews, nothing more than a chat, no resume reviews, no nothing. So I went back to the drawing board and said, hey, maybe my resume is too military heavy and I need to cater to these jobs, which are more leadership and management positions. So I actually hired somebody on LinkedIn and went the extra mile and paid a professional to write my resume after I did like a 1-hour interview with them on the phone. And then they also sold the service of redoing your entire LinkedIn page, which was really awesome. And they kind of showed me how, from the opposite side, how employers search for prospective employees. So the company kind of took me through a back engineering process of the way that my LinkedIn page needed to look in order to attract the people that I wanted to attract. So I did that and I felt really good about it, probably because I paid for it. And usually when you pay money for something, you expect something in return. And I paid money for it, resubmitted all my resume for different jobs. I was just, now I was just flame spraying job openings, just anything that looked like something that I was qualified for, and nothing except a call from a consulting firm from a guy who was former military, who helped military people get jobs. And he had a very candid conversation with me that I was looking for too much money because I was looking for the same amount that I was making in the military. And I might have to take a pay cut in order to get my foot in the door. So I checked my ego. And when I went back in and applied for round 3 of jobs, whenever it said enter your prospective salary, I lowered it by $25,000, which is a pretty good chunk of change. And I thought, okay, well, if I'm putting it down that low, my skills well exceed that pay band, so somebody should call. Nothing. So now I'm starting to get a little bit frustrated at the process and starting to realize what everybody else is going through in this crazy job market, right? And starting to not get the impression, but understand when people said your network is your net worth. And I had no network in the civilian world. So my net worth was not big, actually zero, because I didn't get hired by any of those companies. So what I really started to do then was go out to these separate communities and kind of start going to these events to meet people, to network and things like that. So I'm going to stop the conversation right there, and I'm going to fast forward because the other stuff isn't relevant. All you need to know about what I just explained to you is nothing came out of that. I talked to a lot of people. I got a lot of experience chatting people up, talking about my resume, getting my pitch down. And I felt that even though I was doing all that stuff and it was a rite of passage, I still wasn't breaking in. So I had a talk with my wife, and we sat down and we started discussing flying again. And we were talking about the pros and cons, and she was asking me why I didn't want to do it. And it was simply, like I said, because I'd been there and done that before and wanted to do something new. And as we kind of talked through it, it became less about me and became more about the family, and it became more about our kids and security and what life would look like if I started to fly again. And we made the decision that I was going to just go ahead and put all my eggs in the basket of going back to flying, which was the best decision that I could have made. So immediately when I started applying to airlines, because you have to remember there's all different tiers. You have the majors, which are American, Delta, United. You have the majors that are cargo, FedEx and UPS. And then under that, you have regionals. And then under that, you have, just as you keep going down, the tier of airline gets less and less. Not that the pilots are worse or that the companies are worse. They just don't have the net worth to pay their employees a certain amount. And maybe the people that own that organization are just doing something very niche. For instance, they're just flying athletes around and superstars. So they just have a fleet of really expensive jets like G5s and stuff like that, like Gulfstreams. And that's what they do. So they have no intention of breaking into carrying tons of passengers because they just do stuff for rich people. And that's awesome, although that work-life balance isn't so good. So I knew from the military that I had experience to break into kind of the upper echelon of aviation. And so I put my ego aside and I just started firing out resumes to anybody and everybody all up and down that chain. And the great news was almost immediately all of those bottom carriers, and when I say bottom, I don't mean bad, no disrespect, but the lower paying, less quality work-life balance carriers, they immediately contacted me and were like, we want to get you in the training program. So I'm like, okay, cool. I knew enough from talking to people that don't jump at the first opportunity. So then I ratcheted it up and applied to like the mid-tier airlines. And once again, I got tons of traction. So now I'm feeling good. I'm like, whoa, I'm finally getting some responses. This was the right decision. And I'm like, okay, well, if I'm getting into the middle tier, let's go ahead and just shoot for the stars and see what it takes to get right up into the majors, which is a long, daunting, expensive process. But like I said, I put all my eggs in one basket and I went for it. And so I'm not going to tell you about the training or anything or how I got to all that. So let's fast forward a couple months later. I'm not getting any traction from the majors. And now I'm feeling a little deflated, like, oh man, I'm going to have to start at one of the mid-level carriers, which is very common. Started a mid-level carrier, work my way up. And that's going to take like a year or two. So whatever, it's just like a 2-year buy-in, no big deal in the grand scheme of things, right? Well, as I'm just about to pull the trigger on a mid-level carrier, a friend tells me about an aviation conference that's happening in Dallas, and that it's just for military aviators. Or excuse me, it's not just for military aviators. It's run by a military aviator organization, and all the civilian airlines were going to be there, but other candidates are allowed, even if you're not military. You can go there and go to the booths and talk to people. So buy a ticket, fly out to Texas, and it's an eye-opening experience. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants there. The lines are just as long as can be, just to sit down with somebody for 5 minutes to show them your resume. And I just realized when I looked out at the sea of people, we all look the same, like either blue suit or gray suit, short haircuts, no facial hair, because pilots aren't allowed to wear or have a beard because of wearing the oxygen mask, so you get a good seal. And I'm just like, whoa, how am I going to stand out here? So I do the 3-day conference, and one of the airlines said, hey, we're really interested in you flying for us. Would you be willing to stay an extra day, a day after the conference, and coming to our training facility, which happened to be in Dallas, and we'll just give you an on-site interview, and we'll put you in the simulator. You'll fly a couple sim or one sim event, and then we'll see what happens. So I'm like, yes, I will stay. So they pay for the hotel, they pay for all the Ubers, which is super cool. And I go to the interview, and it was great. Now, here's where the point of the story is before all of this happened, with the previous trying to get a job not flying and then trying to break into flying, you're talking about like a 6-month period of grinding. If you've ever tried to, or I'm sure you've tried to, when you're applying for jobs, how hard it is and how up and down the emotions are and how deflating it can be when you're not getting calls back, or you get a call and then you get the call or email saying that you're not hired. And so that's where I was. I was really down, to be honest with you. I say that I always put my ego aside, but now my ego is just sitting on my shoulder going, man, you were in the military for 22 years. You were retired as a senior officer. You have all this leadership experience. You have multiple deployments. You've led tons of people. The last command that you were at was a staff of 25 that led 1,000 people. You've implemented new processes that are for the better. You've saved millions of dollars for the Navy. Just all this stuff. Like, I'm trying to give myself all these accolades to boost up myself, to say, something's going to happen. You're worth it. The employer should have hired you. They're missing out. Well, then when I run out of steam pumping myself up, there was nothing left. And I don't remember if I called my wife or not before this event happened, but I'm sitting in the hotel room before I go to this on the spot interview that I'm about to do the next morning. So I'm not prepared. Like, usually for an aviation interview, you study for weeks, if not months, or hire a prep company who knows the ins and outs of the questions that company is going to ask and the profiles they're going to fly in the simulator. And I literally know nothing. But at this point, I'm like, studying be damned. I'm just going to go in there and do what I do, which is aviate, navigate, communicate, and see what happens. And I remember, now this is where it gets into the religious aspect. So I am Christian, but like most people, I'm Christian light. I didn't really grow up going to church. I don't really go to church that much. I do occasionally because my wife and I try. I pray here and there, but a lukewarm Christian at best. And I just remember sitting in the hotel room and just feeling this overwhelming sense that I needed to let go and give up control, that this process was predicated on my military experience, my 2+ decades where I was in control. I was making decisions, and those decisions resulted in outcomes right before my eyes. So I felt very much in control of my destiny. And now I was in an environment where I wasn't in control, and I was at the beck and call of human resources department, administrative departments, people that were looking at my resume, a panel in an interview, whatever they thought about me, if they thought about my facial expressions, my responses, my mannerisms, just whatever. And, I thought I could control that by prepping as much as I could. But at the end of the day, I realized I can't control those people's perception of me. And if I try and be somebody that I'm not just to appease them in the interview, I'm not being authentic and might put myself in a trap of getting hired somewhere that I don't want to work because they hired me based off of a personality that wasn't real and a personality that would fit well with their company. But then if I try and act like myself, once I get hired, I'm going to be a black sheep. That's kind of severe, but you get the point. So I just remember this overwhelming sense of my faith. And I said, I wasn't going to beat you over the faith stick. So it's not like I opened a Bible and started reading passages or anything like that, but I really just put my head in my hands and was like, God, I can't do this anymore alone. I can't. Like, I've given it all. I've paid money. I've put in time studying. I've paid a lot of money, by the way, to get the certifications you need to transfer from military to civilian. At that point, I've already spent months away from my family, going to these different training locations, going to conferences, paying for airline tickets, paying for hotels. At that time, I wasn't receiving my retirement pay yet. So I'm just racking up the credit card bills, which I'm not used to having debt. So that was terrifying. And I just felt like nothing was working out. And that night in the hotel room, I just made I want to say conscious decision, but it wasn't. It was subconscious. It was just my body telling me, you're done. It's kind of like throwing up, which is a weird analogy when your body's just like, get this out of me. That's what it was. My subconscious was just like, you're done. Stop pressing, stop pushing, stop trying to be under control, relinquish your control. And this is why I say I'm not going to beat you over the head with a religious stick. Relinquish your control to whoever or whatever you believe in, whether that's God, Jesus Christ, whether that's spirituality, whether that's alignment with energy, whether that's whatever religion you believe in, Muslim, Buddha, Jewish, I don't care, right? But all these religions have more in common than they don't. And what that is that there's something greater than us. And the moment we think we're fully in control, we're going to get slapped with a stick. That's like, no, you're not. And that's what I was feeling. So that night, no kidding, I not even half-assed, I just relinquished control. And I prayed and I said, that's it. Like, I didn't make any like promises like people do. And they're like, if you help me with this, I promise I will go to church once a week for the next 2 years, or I'm going to donate this much to the church, or do this for the homeless. I didn't do any of that. It was just me and the man upstairs. And I was just giving up in a good way, giving up to him, just giving up control and saying, I can't do it. So even if you're not religious, and I want to get into this later, and I want to pose a question to you about giving up control, because I think you'll know what I'm talking about. It seems like when you give up control, a lot of times things start flowing and you start hitting that flow state. And flow state's all about not control, lack of control. So the next day I go into the interview. I do very well. I get to the airport and I'm about to fly back home. And I get a call that day, which is very rare. And they're like, how would you like to come fly with us? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Sounds good. Boom. I'm on cloud 9. I got a job. Family's safe and secure. I call my wife and said, babe, we did it. And she's super happy. And I get on the plane and I just start to reflect about how at peace I was after I gave up control and just went into that interview and I was just myself. And I didn't sit in the lobby before they called me back for the interview, running through a whole bunch of questions in my head. I just sat there in flow state. Drinking a coffee, like, whatever happens, happens. I know I'm a good pilot. I know I got the skills. If they like me, they like me. If they don't, keep pressing. And so I got that job. And then that same week, when I got back home, I got a call to go to another interview for a major airline. And I'm like, man, this is crazy. And so I went and flew out to that interview, finished the interview, flew back home, and I got a call for another interview from another airline. And it's like, whoa, when it rains, it pours. And you'd think at this point I'd just be like jumping up and down, but now I'm questioning this whole that night in the hotel room. I'm like, what happened? Because I didn't do anything different other than just give myself to a higher power and say, honestly, with 100% conviction, whatever happens, happens. And I know that you have me in the palm of your hand. Just help me be strong enough to get through the hurdles until we get to the end where you know I should be. And so I go to the second interview. And when I'm in the second interview, I'm in the HR portion and the panel's asking me questions. And at the very end, they're like, hey, great job. You're going to go to the other part of the interview now, but we're missing one of your references for one of your supervisors. Can we get their phone number? And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't have their phone number memorized because a lot of us don't memorize phone numbers anymore, but like I can hop out real quick and grab my phone because you're not allowed to take your phone into these interviews. And I'll get you the number. So I open up my book bag, look at the home screen of my iPhone, and there's a congratulations email. You know, just because when it shows you the little header for the email, you know, you still have to open up the email to see what it fully says. But I saw congratulations and I saw the airline, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I quickly opened the email, looked through it, and it's like, congratulations, you're hired, blah, blah, blah. I put the phone in my bag, and now I'm just completely in flow state because I have 2 job offers. I'm in the middle of an interview with another great company. And because I had just let everything go, I just breezed through the rest of the interview. And I know some of that you're going to say, well, it's because you were totally relaxed because it's way easier to interview when you know you have a job, you have something on the back. But remember, these were like not, I racked and stacked the companies I wanted to work for. And this company that I was currently interviewing with that day, I really wanted to work for them. And so I was still like nervous, you know, but like total flow state, finished the interview. And then they at the end of the interview, they put us all in a room and they're like, hey, some of the candidates that we really want, a couple of you are going to get a call tomorrow within 48 hours. The rest of you are going to get a call within 2 weeks when we get to you. It's like, okay, whatever. So I fly back home and I'm already ecstatic that night. My wife and I like had a glass of champagne. We're like, we got 2 job offers. Like, this is great. The future's looking bright. And I woke up the next morning, took the kids to school. And like right when I got home, I'm packing my gym bag to go to the gym and I get a call, which is rare. Usually you just get an email and I get a call from somebody on the staff and they're like, hey, this is so-and-so from company X. We really like what you got. We want you. How would you like to come work for us? And I'm like, yes, this is yeah, absolutely. This sounds great. And I hung up the phone, ran upstairs and told my wife, and she's like, you got to be kidding me. And at this point, I told her the hotel room story. And so that's the end. Is nothing happened in 6 months. And then within a period of like 7 to 10 days, I got offers from, when I said I racked and stacked the companies that I wanted to work for, I got to my top 3 out of 3. They all wanted to hire me, all because I gave in. So now let me pose some questions to you about the story that I just told you. Does alignment work better than pressure? So now whether we're talking in the religious context or we're talking the energy context or we're talking about you being a yoga practitioner or meditating, do you think that all the pressures we put on ourselves in this very fast-paced world, and we have so many control mechanisms that make us think that we're in control, like we got a car that can take us wherever we want so we can be wherever we need to be on time. Hopefully we have money so we can pay these bills on time. Hopefully we have these skills to manage this project to meet a deadline on time. And it's like you're doing all these things, and I think we get into we convince ourselves that we're in charge. But then something happens, like somebody in the family gets cancer, or there's a car wreck or some kind of tragedy, or maybe there's not a tragedy. Maybe it's something that's like kind of good, but still not good. Like say your company says, hey, our headquarters is moving. we're moving to whatever state. Say you live in Texas and they're like, we're moving to Tennessee. And you're like, what? I can't move to Tennessee. Or is there teleworking? And they're like, nope, pack your bags. Like we'll pay for everything, but we're uprooting you. Let's go. For me, that's easy because military. I'm like, okay, cool. I'll pack my bags. But other people like civilians, like you have your friend network, you have your doctor that you're used to going to, your kids are in a great school. Maybe you're not married. Maybe you're dating somebody and you've been in a relationship now for like a year and it's starting to get serious. And now you have to go tell your boyfriend or girlfriend, like, my company's moving me. Like, and now you got to make some real big decisions. Like, do we want to do this long distance? Do you want to move with me? And it's like, all these things happen all the time where it's like, just when you think you're totally in control, something comes out of nowhere and tells you you're not in control. And the more I pose the question to you, do you think forcing it is what is driving your life? Or do you think that the things that have actually happened that have changed the trajectory of your life for the good was when you actually just gave in and you actually just became yourself? You stopped trying to force everything and you just said, I don't like to say whatever happens for a reason. I don't really like that saying, or like the Jesus take the wheel kind of mentality, because you obviously still have to put in the work to make stuff happen. But I mean, when you stop worrying over every little aspect of every decision that's leading to whatever end state you desire, it's just ridden with anxiety and stress and sleepless nights, which leads to bad habits of over drinking or trying to find your peace and calm at a bar on a Friday and Saturday night, or juggling whatever it is you're juggling. And you just, at the end, it's just too much. So that's question one. Do you think that alignment works better than pressure? Question number two, does giving into the spiritual realm unlock the path, or would these things have happened anyway? Meaning, do you think that on any span of religion, excluding being an absolute atheist, so whether your religion is, like I said, yoga, meditation, believing in energy and the universe and alignment, the stars, I don't know, whatever you're into, all the way to traditional faith-based, do you think living in that world and giving into that and practicing that as best as you can is what's creating these outcomes? Or do you think these outcomes would have happened anyway? And question three, is it safe/smart to 100% give yourself into a predestination type, the path is already laid out for you? So traditional predestination, meaning all these things are going to happen no matter what you do, or predestination light, meaning that, yes, the end state is probably still the end state in some way, shape, or form, but the path to get there is going to look like this. And that path is dependent on your choices. So you can choose to get there the hard way, the easy way, a mix of both, whatever. Or do you just not believe it at all? Do you just believe that you are the master of your destiny and that it is your actions day in and day out that dictate what the outcome is going to be? I will tell you what my opinion is, and please leave a comment. You can agree, disagree. We can meet somewhere in the middle, which is what I always hope happens in positive discourse, which is, I believe, even if you take traditional religion out of the picture, I believe that we as human beings have no real concept of all of the complexities that are occurring, one, from human to human interaction, and then from human to community/population interaction, and then with the interaction with the actual earth itself, and then the universe and the cosmos. I think that every theory that I get my hands on, and I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I'm talking about when they talk about other advanced civilizations living before us, and then the earth was wiped out, and maybe some people were left, maybe some people were left behind, and some people, or maybe it was completely wiped out and another people populated the earth, but then found these old civilizations and then reverse engineered some of their technology. And that's why you see these like technology leaps all of a sudden on the timeline where it's like, oh, nothing was happening. Like, boom, all of a sudden we had all these inventions, right? All of a sudden we had these artists and these musicians, or pyramids are being built, or, irrigation, the wheel, like you name it. Look, guys and girls, this is absolute fact. Homo sapiens only been around for like 300,000 years. And of that 300,000 years, we've only been advanced for like 3 or 4,000, 5,000 of those. I think the oldest civilization that they're talking about, where they found like a pyramid that actually looks like a community, is like 10,000 years old. So 10,000 out of 300,000, and that's 300,000 out of millions of years that the earth has been here. And with all the stars and all the planets, we're finding black holes. We're finding other planets that are like ours. I just saw in the news like recently that they just found a galaxy that rotates around a central star just like ours. And I think it's just like us. It's exactly like a human being with our tiny minds to dismiss all that stuff, because that's what we do. We're somehow programmed, because we're on this earth and we're at the top of the food chain, to be like, nothing else is out there. We're the best. There can't be anything else out there. I'm using that argument against that argument and saying, no, that's the way that we think. And we shouldn't think that way. Like, there's so much out there that we don't know, and so many random occurrences, and especially, don't even get me into all this UFO stuff or UAP stuff that's going on right now. Like, how much of a bombshell would that be? I want to say, when it occurs, that there's finally absolute proof, and the government comes out, a government in any country comes out and says, yes, we confirm that at some point in our history, we have got one or multiple unidentified flying objects that crashed, and we have one in our possession. And whether they have a figure or a creature or not, say it's just the technology and the little alien got away, it's still like, hey, the chemical makeup is not from this earth. The technology is not from this earth. It's just like, do you know how much of a wrench that would throw in so many things that we think about, all the way from religion to science to physics to the solar system? I digress. But anyway, that's what happened to me. And I really do believe that me giving in, and this is not the first time this has happened in my life. I've done this a couple times where I've really hit a brick wall and needed some extra help. And with 100% conviction, gave myself to a higher power. And then every single time I've done it, which isn't often, but the times that I've done it, when I look back on those incidences, I'm like, it can't be coincidence. It just can't. So I want to know what you think about it. I hope you enjoyed the episode. See you next time.